Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies podcast, where science meets real-life experience to empower diabetes management. I'm John Pemberton. I've lived with type 1 diabetes since 2008 and have spent nearly 20 years mastering both the science and art of managing it. Through personal experimentation, published research, and my work as a diabetes specialist dietitian, I've gained deep insights into what truly makes a difference. When my son Jude tested positive for type 1 diabetes antibodies, I realised that all the knowledge in my head was wasted if I couldn't communicate it in a way that was clear, actionable, and easy to come back to. So I built the Glucose Never Lies education programme, a free online resource designed to teach people diabetes management exactly the way I'd want people to understand it if they were looking after my son. After battling a functional motor disorder for many years and recently experiencing a major depressive episode, I was eventually pulled out of that hole by my friends, family, and professionals who helped me get back to being me. That experience taught me the power of giving, and this podcast is my way of giving back. My co-host Louise is a highly experienced diabetes nurse with over 20 years in the field. She brings a wealth of knowledge, and her superpower is making complex diabetes science accessible and practical for everyday life. She is the best diabetes nurse I've ever worked with, and there have been some good ones. Most importantly, she keeps me in check and keeps the podcast on point. So, if you're living with diabetes or supporting someone who is, we want to make things easier, clearer, and importantly, more enjoyable. We hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please share it with those who may like it too. As a disclaimer, the information shared on the Glucose Never Lies podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. While we discuss strategies and insights for diabetes management, this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes plan. That done with, let's get into the content. Episode 9, which is the ATTD 2025 top hits and other fun things it picked up along the way. So last week I was in Amsterdam. It was a fantastic conference, 4 days packed full of new learnings, catching up with friends, making new friends, and also a little bit of partying as well. Probably you can hear in my voice I've come back with some kind of virus. That's what happens when you go out till 5:30 in the morning on the last night, enjoying yourself with new friends that you've made. But that's all good, and certainly a partying with type 1 diabetes episode will definitely have to come sooner rather than later. So what I plan to do in this episode, first of all, you'll notice Louise is not with me. She's deep in a dissertation for her advanced nurse practitioner role. So rather than wait, I thought I would just knock this episode out and get the key information from the ATTD to yourselves. But then she's going to join me very soon for our CGM series, and there will be no better time to do that, considering what I saw at the ATTD, which was a raft of new continuous glucose monitoring devices available both in Europe and the UK, and some of them with very questionable, if not non-existent, accuracy data. So we'll definitely cover a little bit that further in the podcast and certainly come on the upcoming series. So this episode's really going to be telling you about what were my top hits and also my presentation. And then finally, just a few things about what's upcoming in the world of diabetes and technology. So I guess getting into the sort of top hits, there was so much about automated insulin delivery systems. For people with type 2 diabetes, quite clear improvements of 10% or so time in range with the updated Control IQ Plus algorithm, which is looking fantastic. And most importantly, that was also achieved with a reduction in insulin doses. And we've seen this where I work. Automated insulin delivery systems, they improve glycemic control. They can actually lead to weight stabilization, if not weight loss, for people who are overweight. And that is achieved by a reduction in total daily insulin. So that, again, means that these systems are managing to put the insulin in the times of the day where it's needed and not over-deliver insulin in other times of the day. So type 1, type 2 diabetes, it kind of doesn't really matter. These systems are really performing fantastically well. What was really interesting is there was lots of experimental research on upcoming algorithms that are fully closed loop, and they're using artificial intelligence. There was one called Bolus GPT, and they're using advanced AI to determine when the glucose level starts to rise rapidly that the likelihood is a meal is in. Therefore, they put extra insulin going in, and they're using something called neural net based algorithms, which I'm led to believe are They cut the computational power of the requirements down massively, which means that in the future we're probably going to be seeing smaller devices because the electronics and the power that they need is going to be significantly reduced by neural net algorithms. And again, these fully closed loop algorithms were able to achieve 66% time in range, which is very similar to the 69% for people using hybrid closed loops or AID systems putting the insulin in. And when I say fully closed loop, the people just put the system on, they don't bolus for their food, they just go about their business normally and don't interact apart from changing the insulin every 3 days in the sensor when required. So that, again, to only get a 3% reduction in time in range is possibly a well worth trade-off. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're someone who is very astute with their bolusing and is getting 80 or 90% time in range, these systems are not going to be for you. However, if you're someone who just really does not want to interact with the diabetes and they've just had enough of it, one of these fully closed loop systems will be able to get you certainly greater than 60, pushing towards 70% time in range without you having to bolus. So again, if diabetes is really impacting in your life, and even with an automated insulin delivery system, you're frustrated by the amount of work you have to do, there is light on the horizon for getting more than 65% time in range by basically just putting the pump on, making sure the sensor's looked after and it's running in sort of fully closed loop mode, and you'll potentially be able to get above 65% time in range, which is fantastic. There's some really nice data from the Type 1 Diabetes Exchange in America, which looked at, depending on when you go onto an automated insulin delivery system from your diagnosis, what is your level of diabetes control sort of a year to 2 years afterwards. And they looked at people who went on in the first 6 months versus 6 to 12 months versus longer than 12 months. And basically what they showed is that if you went on in the first 6 months, you would generally get 67% time in range a year to 2 years out. Whereas if you went after 6 to 12 months, 65%, not much difference. But then if you went on after 12 months, you'll then drop down to 60%, basically suggesting that maybe that early help from the AID system and engaging with it is potentially going to have long-lasting benefits. And that, compared to the people who didn't go on an automated insulin delivery system at all, only got 54% time in range. So again, the trend is very much going to be starting automated insulin delivery system as soon as possible, because we know that 2 years down the line, those people are going to be have higher time in range towards that 70%, whereas the people who go on it later will not. And importantly, there was less hypoglycemia and less DKA as well. So again, from an automated insulin delivery perspective, it really seems the sooner the better. And these potential fully closed loop systems that are coming are going to take away a lot of the burden for the people who just don't want to engage on a daily basis, or potentially even if you just miss 1 or 2 boluses a day, having that fully closed loop, very aggressive algorithm is potentially going to be very helpful. Moving on, and this is kind of, it comes to the recent insulin resistance guide I published. There was a lot on GLP-1 receptor agonists and also the dual GIP ones, which is basically semaglutide or tirzepatide. So at the moment, they're not indicated for people with type 1 diabetes, yet they have been used off-label. And some of the observational research shows very much what like the actual research for people who are with type 2 diabetes. First of all, you get a 0.5% reduction in HbA1c, roughly about a 16% reduction in body weight, and a 30% or so reduction in total daily insulin. So it seems that these GLP-1 therapies are very, very effective at improving glycemic control, weight if you need to lose weight, and reducing total daily insulin dose and insulin resistance. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop in the show notes a link to the insulin resistance guide that I recently published that talks through the 8 different causes of insulin resistance and what can be done from a lifestyle and pharmacology point of view to tackle some of that insulin resistance. It's probably unfortunate in some ways that these GLP-1 receptor agonists, the semaglutide and the tirzepatide, are so effective in type 2 diabetes and people who are overweight, because the companies have no incentive in doing a small randomized control trial for people with type 1 diabetes, because there's not enough money to make in it. So that means it's going to probably struggle to get onto formularies and guidances for reimbursement. So it may be that the doctors will have to use these type of therapies off-label, but with having the data available, such as these retrospective observational data, you may be able to take that to your clinician and say, well, look, we know there isn't a randomized control trial. However, the data is very, very strong in terms of improved glycemic control, improved weight management, and reduction in daily insulin dose. So if that's something that interests you, check out that in the show notes. All the references are going to be there so you can have a look at those things. The next thing is there was lots of information which I loved on exercise as medicine, or exercise to improve time in range, or exercise to improve health or activity. So Professor Mike Riddell did a lovely presentation with regards to people with type 2 diabetes and their use of activity to improve time in range. And again, there was some really nice questions of, oh, well, what's more effective, CGM or a GLP-1? And again, the sort of discussion is, well, the GLP-1 will be very effective at weight reduction, improving in time in range, but also using continuous glucose monitoring as a powerful feedback tool of things such as activity to keep on top of highs. And again, kind of weight management. So the two in dual will potentially be very, very powerful. And there was a really nice session by Professor Riddell who showed all of that data, showing the benefits of being active and how it improves time in range, reduces post-meal exposure to glucose levels by doing activity before and after. So that is well worth looking at. That's the Act 1 study. I'll put a plug in for myself. On episode 8, I gave you the look at what I was going to present, and basically that's what I presented, to show the power of activity to lower high glucose levels between meals. And again, that got a standing ovation. And the reason why it got a standing ovation is because at the end, I used ChatGPT, and my daughter helped me to make this rap about the benefit of activity to lower high glucose levels. So I played this at the end of my talk, which is fairly novel. So over the next minute and a half, this is what I played at the end of my talk, and it got a standing ovation. So take a listen and see what you think.
If you're having glucose problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but high glucose ain't one. Yo, glucose spiking, numbers hitting the sky, but I got the fix. No need to ask why. Activity rolling like a turbojet. Insulin's moving, ain't no regret. Popeye had his spinach. I just take flight, lace up my kicks, keep my levels tight. Batman got the signal. Now it's my time. That insulin lag? Nah, now it's prime. I move like a broomstick. Call me HP. Gliding through the park. Glucose ain't phasing me. It's a blockbuster show, yeah, primetime thrill. Numbers in check, got that science skill. Marty hit the future. Now I'm locked in. With every step, I'm taking the win. Call it compliance, call it finesse, activity keeping my glucose at rest. So you want to stay sharp? Take a lesson from me. Ain't no magic, just movement. That's the key. From the lab to the streets, the studies don't lie. Step after step, keep your activity high. This ain't just a story, nah, this real life. Keep that body moving, cut through the strife. So if highs got you stressing, here's what you do. Let that insulin ride and let movement push through. I got 99 problems, but high glucose ain't one.
Okay, so now that bit of fun's over, what else was found? So there was some nice information with regards to nutrition. And again, Dr. Carnell Smart gave a really nice overview of, first of all, the benefits of automated insulin delivery systems. Of course, they're fantastic. However, there are some situations where they're unable to keep up. For example, high-fat meals such as pizzas that often have a high degree of insulin resistance that require the user, if they want to get optimum time in range, to consider extra strategies such as dialing in more carbs than is being actually eaten and spreading that insulin out, maybe split boluses. So again, that was really helpful in terms of these automated insulin delivery systems are fantastic. There is no doubt about that. However, there are situations where they're going to be unable to deal with the level of insulin resistance caused by high-fat meals. And if you think back to the episode on the AID systems, the top 10 tips, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. We discussed how for all of the different systems, the different strategies you can use to give extra insulin and spread that out. So that was nice to see. There was a lot of talk about, yes, 70% timing range is where we're currently aiming, but what does the future look like? So we used to have something called timing tight range, which is between 3.9 and 7.8 millimoles per litre, or 70 to 140 milligrams per decilitre. But quite rightly, the discussion has been, well, is that really tight range, or is that normal glycemia? So it's now going to be changed, it sounds like, to time in normal glycemia. So it's going to become a ting thing, which I actually quite like. So it's going to be time in ting or a ting thing. And what was quite interesting was, with the current AID systems, you only probably get about 50 to 60% of people who will get 50% or more time in ting. And the systems alone are not going to be able to achieve there. So what else will be needed? Maybe a GLP-1, or a lot of talk about, well, using activity to lower high glucose levels between meals is another way to drive time in ting. So again, check out episode 8, which gives you all the details on how to use activity to lower high glucose levels between meals. Obviously, these automated insulin delivery systems, we've talked a lot about improvement in time in range, start them as early as possible, lower HbA1cs, but there was loads of fantastic data around the improvements in quality of life, particularly sleep quality. And the Tandem 2iQP trial basically showed this. It showed that the sleep quality and reduction in fear of hypoglycemia of these automated insulin delivery systems is almost more powerful for the people's daily experience than some improved glucose control. So again, the value of these systems are really brought home during this conference, not only from a glycemic perspective, but also from a quality of life perspective. And those things are, really important, obviously. One thing that was brought up and was an absolutely essential point to bring home is that these automated insulin delivery systems are changing the face of diabetes management. However, there is a bias to people from white ethnic backgrounds and more affluent backgrounds to get greater and faster access to automated insulin delivery systems. And that is a real shame, because in general, the people from less affluent backgrounds and people from ethnic minority groups who haven't had the early access to other technologies such as CGM are generally people with higher HbA1cs and lower time in range, and they're people who would benefit the most. So it was almost like a big call, as there should have been, to really look at unconscious biases, look at tackling from a service level how to prioritize and make sure that the provision is equitable in terms of the delivery of these automated insulin delivery systems. And I can only tell you from our experience where I work in 2022, we looked at our cohort who we had on an automated insulin delivery system at that time, and it was pretty shocking. We have only about 35% of our cohort are of white ethnic backgrounds, yet at that time, of the people who were on automated insulin delivery system, 90% of them were from a white ethnic background. So at that point, we looked at ourselves and said, come on, let's sort this out. And over the space of 2 years, we completely reversed that round and make sure that everyone who was on, basically the people who were on, only 30% were from white ethnic backgrounds, and the other 65% were from ethnic minority backgrounds. So sometimes it takes taking a cold, hard look at how you're delivering a service and making sure that it's delivered equitably is absolutely essential. And I guess then finally, in terms of the top hits that came out, was looking at, is automated insulin delivery systems alone going to get us to 70% time in range or 50% time in ting? And the answer is probably not. We're going to need more advanced algorithms that use artificial intelligence, such as Bull's GPT. We're going to need things like GLP-1 receptor agonists and SGLT2 inhibitors, because we'll need to get things on top of post-meal control, using things like activity to lower high glucose levels to really drive that extra time in range. So again, I'll put a link into the insulin resistance guide that I wrote, and that covers all of that information, gives you a much greater depth with regards to how you can use lifestyle and pharmacology to get that 65% to 80% time in range with small adjustments as we go along. So that covers the kind of the top highlights really from an AID system, adjunctive therapies, and some of the key things. But what was really interesting to me was the number of continuous glucose monitoring systems that were there marketing their goods. CGM is kind of my thing. So you will see there is a CGM series written on the glucose never lies, and we're going to do a podcast series about this. But essentially, we discuss very much that when you're looking at the performance or accuracy of a continuous glucose monitor, you can't just look at the advertised mean absolute relative difference, the MARD that they show, because every single company that's there showed a MARD of less than 10%. And that would make you think that that will be okay and very good for making insulin decisions based on it. But essentially, it all depends on how the study was done to achieve that MARD of less than 10%. So I put in the show notes for here a list of the systems that have been tested effectively using a robust study design, and you can check that in the CGM series also, and the list of sensors that have not been tested like that. And what I am not saying is these systems are not accurate. All I'm saying is we don't know whether they'll be accurate if they get tested effectively with a robust study design. So there was the usual players there, such as Abbott, the Freestyle Libre, Dexcom with their series, and Medtronic, and then there were a whole host of new ones coming to the market, such as Roche. There was a new one from Ewell, there was Cybionics, there was a whole host of them. And I just want to kind of show you, in my opinion, how a company should bring a product to market. So if you take the Roche Smart Guide, when you go and have a look at their accuracy paper, they follow all the study design basics, which means that the accuracy that they report is likely to be one that will represent real life of use. And they've actually shown 90% or more of the readings will be very accurate with no risk, which is close to on par with the rest of the market leaders. So that was the only other company or new company that have done the study design properly. All the other ones have less than 70% of people with type 1 diabetes in their study. They either didn't use meal and insulin challenges, and they didn't test the sensor in the very low range and the very high range. So it basically means that their performance that they report with this MARD of less than 10% tells the user absolutely nothing about whether this is going to perform accurately or well in a real life situation. So I'll put a list of all the products that will be available, which ones have got a high quality study design and which ones haven't. You can check that out for yourself. Very important, because these are going to be coming thick and fast into the European and certainly the UK market. While we're on Roche, showed that they had a symposium where essentially they're looking at a new type of continuous glucose monitoring device for adults, for people who are on injections. And the key things that they're showing is that they have 3 different AI-driven predictions. One for a 30-minute hypoglycemia risk, one for a 2-hour lookout into the future with a 95% confidence interval of where the glucose level is likely to be in the next 2 hours. That might be useful if you want to see a little bit further than the 15 to 30 minutes that the current CGMs allow you to see. And then a 7-hour prediction window overnight to tell you the risk on a traffic light indicator of the risk of going low overnight. So the initial information and the initial studies and the initial usage in some of the European countries looks very positive, and that's coming soon. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops as we go along. So that was the main new thing from the CGM perspective. There was some data from Dexcom which showed that they have a 15-day G7 coming soon, and that was again very accurate for adults and very accurate for pediatrics, and that will be a welcome addition to move their sensor life from 10 days up to 15, so it's on par with the Abbott Freestyle Libre products. When is that coming to Europe and the UK? That time will tell, but hopefully it won't be too long, and that's something to look forward to from that perspective, and that's certainly something that I found helpful and useful. And again, from an Abbott Freestyle Libre perspective, they've now got the 2 Plus and the 3 Plus, which are both 15 days. And again, they're very accurate sensors that meet the highest accuracy standards of the iCGM for use with multiple automated insulin delivery systems. I guess on that note, there was the Libre 2 and the Omnipod 5 system that reported the data from the Radiant trial, which showed basically that the timing range is very similar to what is achieved from the Dexcom G6 and the Omnipod 5 system, roughly about 65% timing range. The only thing we didn't get was the detail of HbA1cs, because timing range is one thing, but what was the HbA1cs like from before and after? So that's the only thing that I guess leaves to be found out once the Radiant trial is fully published and we get the full data on that perspective. So those kind of my highlights from the ATTD 2025. I particularly enjoyed it. I got to meet loads of really cool people, and I've actually cornered a few people for a future podcast. So Professor Othman Moser, who I've worked with on the exercise guidelines, Desi Zahareva, she again is another exercise wizard. So she's agreed to come onto the podcast, which is fantastic. I tried to get hold of Mike Riddell and twist his arm. He said yes, but he's a hard man to get hold of, is what I would say. And some other cool people as well who have got so much insight to offer with regards to technologies and type 1 diabetes, daily management and type 1 diabetes. And yes, it was a lot of fun. So what I would say, what we've got coming up, I'm getting Louise definitely in the studio over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to go a very, very deep dive into continuous glucose monitoring, how you should look at a study or understand the accuracy before you will go about selecting a CGM. We'll do a really deep dive podcast on that. And then we're going to do a deep dive on all the bells and whistles. What is it that you want to get out of a CGM system? What's the accuracy? What alarms does it have? Does it have any futuristic AI alarms? What AID systems is it linked into? What's the size of it? What about optional calibrations? Is that useful? Is it not? So everything to do with CGM, it's something that I'm very passionate about. We will cover in the CGM series, which will be up next. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you've also found the wrap entertaining. I will put all of the stuff in the show notes and all the links, including a download link to the wrap. If you want to use that and share that, please feel free. And again, if you found this useful, please share this with others. And again, leave some comments at the bottom. So thank you very much for listening and your time, and we'll catch you in the CGM series.